Welcome, Amalia. How are you?
How are you?
Pretty good. It's so exciting. I think that's our first time talk face-to-face video call, right?
That's right. Last time we talked face to face was in a coffee shop in Manhattan.
Yes.
And I was concerned about, the coronavirus in China, and we had no idea what's coming up. That's the last time. It was before March. It was February.
Yes, that's February. It's almost a year. Oh, wow.
Almost a year. That's right. That's right. And we had such a good time talking in a coffee shop, and here we are with a new book.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And another book coming out too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's so exciting.
Really excited.
Yeah.
Really excited. So how are you?
Yeah, pretty good. How are you?
Good, I'm good. I'm wearing my MONSTERPIECE headpiece.
Oh, that's
you can see
so
the whole thing.
fun. Yeah.
I'm moving the computer so you can see the whole thing.
Yeah.
It's one of the characters, and I made it into a tiara. Because when I do book launches, I always put on something. Here's my puppet. Say hello to Helen.
Wow, so lovely. Wow. You are really talented. I love all these monsters. Welcome, Amalia. Amalia Hoffman is an award-winning author and illustrator of many children's books, including All Colors, one of the 2019 School Library Journal Best Board Books, and Dreidel Day, a PJ Library book. She is the author of The Brave Cyclist, the true story of a Holocaust hero, illustrated by Kiara Fadel, a junior library guide gold selection book. Amalia frequently tells her stories in schools, libraries, bookstores with puppies and props. She lives in Marchmont, New York. And Amalia is the author-illustrator of our new book, My Monsterpiece, which will be published by Yeehoo Press in March 2021. And welcome, Amalia.
Hello. Thank you so much for introducing me.
Thank you. Yeah, Amalia. So can you talk a little bit about your journey as an author-illustrator?
I kind of got into it the back way. I always did art. I showed in galleries, I showed in museums. And at one point in my life, I started doing window display for big stores in New York. I did the windows for Tiffany, which is like the major store. Tiffany had a history of hiring major artists to do the windows. Rauschenberg and, very important. Andy Warhol did the window. And so I just got the idea, well, maybe I'll walk in there and show him what I'm doing. And I did. And I started doing window display. And I started, decorating stores. And I always noticed that, I will be in the window decorating. And the kids will be on the other side looking, Christmas window, whatever, holiday window. And they will have their face on the window. And they would look and look and look. And that kind of got me the idea that my windows really told stories. There was like a theme in there. And I said, well, the kids love them. Why wouldn't I try writing children's books? I was already doing art, and my art was coming. Whenever I did something, people always said, well, this would be great for kids. But I really didn't think about it when I was younger. So I started one day, I just, got back from a job and started writing. And I wrote my first book, which was Pouring Goodies. And after that, I just continued. It was a lot of work, a very bumpy road. What I did very early in my career is I joined the SCBWI, the Society of Children's Book Writers and Illustrators, just to get my feet in this cold water, so to speak. And I started meeting people, like-minded people, and getting some knowledge of the industry. I really had no knowledge of what I was doing. I had no idea. I had an idea for a book, and that was it. And I went to a couple of conferences in LA, in New York City, some local conference, and that's how I got into it. And then one thing led to another. I sold my first book and my second book, and so on and so on. And eventually, I have my masterpiece. Yeah.
Oh, that's wonderful. So can you, tell us a little bit about this book and how you, what inspires you to create My Monsterpiece?
Yeah, well, this book is very close to my heart because it has a lot to do with me as a child. And it's a celebration of childhood. So I was a really temperamental child. And, at one time there was a contest I belong to, my parents signed me up for a children magazine. I grew up in Israel, so it was not one of the ones people know here, but similar to Highlights or any other magazine. And in there was a contest. And the contest was to create a scary witch. And I worked really hard. I took out all my crayons and all my paints and my paper. I shared a room with my two sisters. So I had, like, each one of us had a little tiny desk and a little tiny corner and all my crayons and all my stuff. And I worked and worked and I sent it to the magazine. And guess what? I didn't win. It wasn't scary enough. And that kind of gave me an idea of a kid who really wants to create something very scary, but just whatever he does or she does doesn't turn out scary at all. And I started thinking about what is a witch, what is a monster. A monster is usually something we're not familiar with, like the Hunchback of Notre Dame or any creature that we call ugly or weird. Now, what is ugly and what is weird? This is something we talk about, like as adults, we understand it better, but kids have certain biases that are passed on to them by the adults. And they are afraid, they are scared of something that is not familiar to them. And I started thinking, we live in a society that's so diverse, and our kids should be able to socialize with and relate to things they're not familiar with, whether they're not in their neighborhood or not in their culture or not in their religion. And that gave me an idea, creating a book about a kid who wants to create a scary monster and gives all the attributes of a scary monster: claws, sharp claws, sharp teeth, ugly features and things like that. But whatever he or she does is taken in a way like, oh, it's so cute, it's so nice, what a great thing. And the kid gets so frustrated. And I started to think about what is frustration for kids. I was a really temperamental child, and I used to make cards for my parents for their anniversaries and birthdays. But when my parents were cross with me or I was angry with them, which happened all the time, I would tear their art. So actually, after my father died, I went to visit my mother in Jerusalem, and we were cleaning up his desk, and I found this. All sorts of pieces of paper like that. And I said, what is this? It was in an envelope. And I said, what is this? And what it was an anniversary card I made for my parents. And one day I had a huge fight with them. And I took the card and I tore it apart.
Oh.
And my father took all the pieces and pieced them together, and just so it looks like what it was before.
Oh.
And then he took all the little pieces, he marked them, and he put them in an envelope.
Oh, wow.
And I found it after he died, and I said to myself, this is it. This is me as a kid. Mm-hmm. This is what I was. This is exactly what I was. It's exactly how I behaved. And so one of the illustrations in the book, when a kid gets really frustrated and just like had it because nobody thought his monster was scary or mean or anything like that. So he tears, or she tears all the art into shreds. Yeah. But that's when the genius of the kids comes up. Well, kids are really inventive. So, and they have tremendous imagination. So then a kid can create something and say, what if a monster wasn't scary? What if a monster wasn't, bad? What if a monster was like us? And then the kid comes up with all these ideas of a monster that eats cookies, and monster like his mother, and monster that loves to eat gobbled popcorn like he did. But it all really came from my childhood. And I think it's one thing that, I like to think about, is that this book is really, for me, it's a celebration of a childhood. Mm-hmm. And therefore, it's also a celebration of myself. Mm-hmm. I grew up, and one day I'm a kid again. Yeah.
Wow, that's wonderful. Yeah, that's really great to know those background stories from an author. That's kind of like stories behind the story that truly make the book so meaningful. It's yeah, we as a publisher see a lot of like marketing potentials of this book, but it's just so special to the author and have a lot of connection to your childhood, and I believe it will connect to other children so well.
So yeah, I hope so. Yeah. I also, in a book, I used a lot of techniques that kids really use. Like I started thinking about what do you use? And so, I looked, because I work a lot with kids. And so I used Fruit Loops that kids actually glue on, and yarn and crayons. And sometimes they don't paint on paper because kids will paint on anything. They'll paint on the floor, they'll paint on the wall. So some of the illustrations are done on a paper bag and things like that. Yeah, I really wanted to be authentic.
Yeah, that's your can you tell us a little bit more about the creative process, and like have you ever have any like difficulties and how you overcome the difficulties?
Yeah, sometimes it was hard because, okay, so I really wanted it to look like a kid created it, but I'm not a kid. And so I really had to think what would be a way a kid will create. First of all, it has to be fast. Whatever they do is fast. It has to be direct. And sometimes it just didn't happen. And I wanted to do something that looked like it was done direct and fast, but I worked on it for many, many hours because I will do one and then another one and another one. I have a bag full of monsters that never made it into the book because I just didn't think they were too tight. And I looked at it and I said, no. So what I did is I kept on looking at kids' art. I looked at my grandchildren's art. I looked at the kids that I work with. I looked at other kids' art. I Googled kids' art. What is it that makes this art so special? So I tried to stay with the colors and not to be too, overdriven by my own thought, but to be very, very spontaneous. So sometimes I notice, it's difficult because I would use the tools that I use for my art, like a paintbrush and a pencil. But then I realized kids don't always do that. Many times they just take their hand, they dip it in paint, and they smear. So half the illustrations in the book was actually done by just smearing paint on paper, without really using a brush. And letting my hands get dirty. That's another challenge, as adults, we want to keep our hands clean, we use brushes and stuff. But I said to myself, no, I put on like an old overall. I covered the floor, I covered the table with newspapers, and I said, go for it. Get it messy. Because that's what kids do. Never, the area is never clean when they work. There's paint here, there's paint there. So it's kind of a process. It was hard. Sometimes it was very challenging, but sometimes it came very easily. It depends also on exactly what I was doing and the days I was working. And, but there were so many times I had to do it over and over again until I said, okay, this looks like what I think a kid would go for.
Wow, that's really amazing. And I knew you really did a lot of like revisions and redo the work, and I never know that's really difficult. Like I could imagine like sometimes my kids they don't know how to draw something and ask me to draw part of the thing on the paper, but I could immediately tell something was drawn by me, not by them. So like adults draw things very tight and very neat, but kids they get loose, they get very creative. That's really difficult to achieve. So over all these revisions along the way, so by any chance like you don't agree with our editor's opinion, so what will you do with that?
Well, this is something that I think everybody has to realize. When you work on a book, it's a team effort. It's not just me. And so you really have to put your ego aside. And say, look, I would like to come in and everything I do, send to my editor, my publisher. They'll say, wow, Amalia, this is great. But I also have to realize that that's not always the case. And you have the editor, you have the art director, you have the, different people working on a book. Each one has a little kind of input into the book. And you have to think of it as a team effort and put the ego aside. It's not about me learning how great I am. It's about how to make the book the best it could be. And I think it's with every book, you just have to say, look, first listen. Even if I don't agree, the first thing I do is I listen
Mm.
and I consider. And I say, what are they telling me? Would it work? Maybe it's better. And for the most part, whatever the editor told me was better. It's just a question of saying, wait a minute, maybe he's saying something to me that, I'm not really getting. But maybe there's a vision there, because when another person looks at it, it comes out of your head. You work inside your head. I'm alone in my studio. I show it to my husband, so, my best friend to look at. But beside that, you're alone, the whole day alone. And then there is somebody else, somebody professional, that has looked at many books and has a whole different view. And it's very important to really listen. Now, there are situations when you listen, but you just feel that it doesn't work for the book for you. And then it's a matter of discussion. It's really a matter of discussion. Rather than saying, no, I don't want to do it. It's a question of, well, maybe we can do part of this and part of this, and then maybe we can merge it together. And I think that's true for any creative process, not just creative process, for any process. Whether it's, politics or industry or anything, you really have to think that the other person might know just as much as you, at least. And you're not on the top of the world alone. Because there's no way that you can work with people if you are not letting them talk and you're not listening to them. So for the most part, it's really a team effort.
That's really great advice, and I actually have the same feeling with you. Like, I still remember the on this page, like that's the last page of the book, and I still remember when the original draft, and I had some idea to improve it, but our designer had another idea, and yes, actually their idea is much better than mine. So okay, that's great. I actually learned something. Yeah.
And thank you so much, because I had a great team. I had a designer, I had an art director, I had you, and I had an editor. And I think the more people say little things, and the designer had some really good ideas. So yeah, that page took some work. I had to rework it a couple of times. At the end, I didn't like the monster, so we changed the monster again. So it was many times a collaboration. Some pages really took many revisions.
Yeah.
And I don't mind it. I think as long as it comes out better at the end, that's really what's important.
Yeah, that's really great that you also enjoy this process and truly bring the book to the next level. So, do you have multiple books you're working on at the same time? And if so, how do you handle different projects simultaneously?
I do. And I am usually, a lot of illustrators and writers are what you call very much into one genre. They have one look. I don't have one look. I work on different styles, number one. And I work on different genre, meaning anything from a baby book, which should be like a board book for a 0 to a 3-year-old, to a very sophisticated, much older child, maybe 8 to 13. I like that. I find that, my head is in different places, different times of the day. And I kind of like the break. So let's say I'm working on right now I'm working on a nonfiction, which would be for an 8 to 13. And that is very factual story that I have no intention of illustrating, for example, because it needs a totally different illustrator. So I'm working on that. I have been working for years on a YA novel, which I never finished, and that is anywhere between YA and adult. So I dip into that. Then I have a board book, which would be for babies, that I'm also working on. And then I have the book that we just contracted, Masha Manchin. So, and then I have another book that's in the back, and I never finished it. And once in a while, I do a little with that. So for me, each book is like a separation. And let's say I get frustrated with something, instead of just saying, oh, it's a waste of a day, I will go to another project and work a little on the other project. The problem is on my computer, there's so many files, and I am the worst when it comes to organizing. So for me, that part is very difficult. Oh, where is it? Where did I put it? And once in a while, I open a file, and then I put something else in a different file because one file is already open from the other project. That's a problem for me. My organization skills are zero. But I like the idea that my day is not spent on one thing. Also, different things happen within a week. So there will be a week when I started working on a project and, I'm not happy with it. I know something is needed there. And something happens. I see something on TV or I read something and I say, oh, that's an idea. So let me work on that. And then the next day, I get another idea for the nonfiction. And I'll fix that a little bit. I don't have a problem, and I don't have a problem working with different techniques, anywhere from very tight illustration to very loose like this one, to paper cuts, to working with crayons and different media.
That's wonderful. So for your previous published book, what would you do for book marketing?
Oh, well, I have a great, I love, see, the thing is, I'm really missing the contact with kids because that is something I do. I dress up in costumes for all my books. So for this book, I thought I'll be wearing this tiara. So I made. And it looks like a character that the kid is actually with. Let me just open the page with the character. Hold on. And it looks like one of the characters in my books, actually. 1 second. I can't do anything because I have the hand holding the mask. Oh, here. So here is one of my favorite spreads.
Yeah, you probably need to, okay, yeah, that's great.
My favorite spread. So I made this puppet that looks a little bit like, that spread. It looks like that character, that monster. And the idea that I have is that if I do it whether on Zoom or in person, I do a lot of presentations. And it's a kind of presentation, where I actually work with kids and the kids are being part of the presentation. So it's like the monster wants to roll around. Rah, rah. The monster wants to scare you now. Rah, rah. Monster here, monster dog. But monster, you don't scare me at all. And monster, let me scare you now. And then all the kids go, rah. So it's kind of a participation thing that I do with kids. I also have, and it's on your website and everything, I have also a lot of coloring pages that the kids can actually color. This is a wonderful way to promote a book and also to get the kids involved. And what I'm hoping that the kids will also do is create their own monster. And I can look at it and I can, kind of publish theirs, maybe on social media. So there will be like a contest, make your own monster, and then they create their monster. I also have activity pages, which are the kind of thing when you see the differences between two pages that are the same, or you count how many balls, the kind of thing that you see in a magazine. And those are things that I intend to do. So I intend to do, we're having a book launch in Second Story Books in Denver. So we're going to do that. And then I have a lot of blogs and a lot of podcasts that I will do. And then I hope that once this virus is over, that I will also do a lot of traveling, because I think this is the kind of book that you can do anywhere. On Zoom, I can have more participants come from all over the world. But in person, I also have the ability to actually do a live presentation, how I created the monster. Another thing that I plan to do, either on Zoom or in person, is to actually do an art project where the kids will bring art supplies. The art supplies will be in front of them by their computer, or if it's a school or a library, it will be on their desk. And then we will create monsters, all sorts of monsters. And I think the kids will really get into it.
Wow, that's wonderful. That's a lot of great ideas.
Yeah.
And really help the book connect with kids all around the world.
I hope so. Yeah, I really do. Because I think monster is a universal creature.
Yes, absolutely. And
I hope not just the kids, I hope the whole family can join.
Yeah.
So if we do a project, I hope that everybody can join and, just dip into it.
Yes, absolutely. And we have a Chinese version coming up, so definitely we are going to do some activities.
I can't wait to see that.
Yeah. I'm so excited about that.
I speak Chinese, but that's one language I always wanted to learn and never did. But I know I can connect with the kids, that I know.
Yeah. So, so what was one of the most surprising things you learned in creating your books and publishing?
Well, in creating books, it's surprising that here you are and you're an adult, and I didn't start that young. You know, it was like a later career for me after millions of other careers. You find that the surprise is that when you work on children book, you find that you can go back to your childhood. Mm-hmm. It's a wonderful thing to discover. Mm-hmm. Because all of a sudden, all these memories that have been sitting in the back of your head, and they could be good and they could be bad. Mm-hmm. They could be very painful, but they come back. So all of a sudden, in a very adult life, you find yourself surprised because you're bringing your own self into it. Not that you necessarily write about yourself, but you're already connecting with kids. You're thinking in terms of kids, so you're thinking in terms of yourself as a kid. And that was a great surprise for me because I was so distant from my own childhood. I hardly have any pictures, you know, in our generation, very few pictures. And I live in a different country where I grew up. And this was like amazing. All of a sudden, I would call my sister and I would say, "Do you remember that?" She said, "No." And so, yeah, you know, and it's a really nice way that you find. Also, I'm connecting much better with kids in general. Whether I meet them at the park with my grandchildren, I find that I have this connection that I don't really have to say much. They know right away, oh, this grandma is childish. She'll crawl under the bed. She'll dip her hand in paint. They just know it. And that was a really great discovery for me.
Yeah, that's true. I never really, I totally agree with you, though this never really come to me. But when I wrote children's books, I do think a lot of when I was a kid. And this is really amazing. Just simply writing my childhood is kind of like it's an amazing experience for me.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, wonderful. So do you have any suggestions to help fellow writers and illustrators?
Well, I think the best suggestion is really not to try to do what somebody else is doing. Mm-hmm. Not to try to see what's like, modern now, or, you know, in fashion. Because everything goes in and out of fashion, in and out of style. But rather to think, what do I want to do? Mm-hmm. And how can I make my book or my art unique? Meaning coming from me, from my own soul, from my own heart. So I think one thing is to really sit down and say, who am I? And what am I going to write about? And what is it that's going to make it special or different or unique? And another thing that I really think is important, when I started, I was like all alone with it. I just had an idea and I knew I wanted to do it. Really join and team with other organizations and meet people who are like-minded and trying to do the same thing. I joined SCBWI, the Society of Children Book Illustrators. I also joined CBIG, the Children Illustrated Book Guild in New York. So we have, up to now, we were meeting once a month and we will have an editor and stuff. But it wasn't just about that. It was about going to dinner after that. We would go to a restaurant, have Chinese food, and discuss whatever. And through these organizations and meetings, I met many, many people who became my friends. So if I get a rejection, I can call a friend. I'm saying, I had a really bad day. And I have somebody to comfort me because these are people that had the same experience. And if I get a book deal, I can rejoice and everybody will, write to me and email me congratulations. So this is very important for writers, not to be alone. You might have a great family, you might have friends, but this is a different family. This is a family that is doing what you're doing. And I got a lot of help, and some of it was technical help, just knowing the industry. Some of it was, more professional. Some of it was just the knowledge. Critique groups, for example, are very, very good for writers because it gives you a chance to go out there and show your book and get opinions before you're sending it out and making it better. And another thing you have to develop is very thick skin because it's a hard profession. You're bound to get rejections and a lot of no-nos, and dealing with it is difficult. So it's the kind of thing you have to develop this attitude, this very positive attitude that, okay, this didn't work, but something is going to work. You have to keep the hope going. That is extremely important, I think. This is really my suggestion. Don't let anything get to you. Just keep on working.
Thank you so much. That's really wonderful suggestions and advice. Thank you so much, Amalia, for joining us today. And
Thank you.
congratulations on your books.
Thank you so much. Say bye-bye. Bye. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for hosting me. Bye.
Oh, thank you.